most people struggle with keeping commitments to themselves and others. So if you're already kicking butt there, look at the other three. But if you don't know where to start, it's just keeping, you just said it, Brandon, it's keeping your commitment to yourself and others. And then all the other stuff will build organically on its own.
What you said about we are innately trusting, I believe that's the case. I believe that we innately want to trust other people. And I think that's a very human thing, although we don't learn until we're burned.
Promises and expectations, they're both related. And so, if I'm looking to build trust with someone, and if anyone's in sales, this, you can start making promises to somebody. Oh, I'll give you a call back, or I'll send you that thing right over to you, or I'll connect you with so-and-so. Okay. And when you keep a promise, you get to build trust.
I think trust is even more valuable when you have other people who are always there to help you figure out if the trust you're feeling or it's dwindling or it's breaking apart is actually happening in that way.
Welcome to the Lunch Break ABCs. I'm Brandon Eastman. We are the Lunch Break ABCs. We're joined by Ben Albert, who over here, Christine Smith, and down here, Mr. Andrew Biernat. And we are all from upstate New York, and we come together once a month to help you to level up in your personal life and your business. And we're not just talking about anything. We're going through the alphabet, stopping at each letter and picking a topic that is most important for you. And how do we know what's most important for you? You might be asking, because you are voting on this topic. Ben, it looks like we wore the same shirt today. Absolutely love it. Is yours from Amazon too?
It's a Hanes.
Hanes? Okay.
Yeah, it's a Hanes. I think I might have purchased like a 6-pack on Amazon, but it's a Hanes X-Temp.
So we both purchased from Amazon because we trust that our purchase is going to be here within the next day or two.
So within the next 12 hours even.
Maybe in Rochester, it's the same day bot dropping off your order. But I mean, trust, the reason I say this, trust is involved in everything, right? It's involved in who we buy from, why we buy. Trust is instrumental in personal relationships and business relationships. And I was actually surprised. I don't know what you guys think, but I was surprised that this was picked amongst the 4 other topics that we had. So we had people voting on time management, teamwork, transformation, which was second winner here, and trust was number 1, with almost 40% of people voting that they wanted to talk about the importance of trust in business and life. So I think we always start this way, but I'm curious to hear from you guys. Why do you think people voted on trust? Why do you think trust is so important today in business and in life?
Part of me always wants to relate it to like what's going on out in the world right now. And like, we're starting to gear up for like a big political cycle right now. And like, oh, elections are coming and this and that. It's just a season of a notorious amount of mistrust, distrust, and factionalization and fracturing and just people just feeling either like they're not being heard or like they are marginalized or like they need to stand up for something or whatever. It's always kind of curious seeing how what's currently going on impacts what we're talking about on the show. So macro perspective, that's my thought, but really just in general for business, I think trust is one of those, it's an essential ingredient, but you don't often hear about it. And so I didn't expect this one to win either. And because it's got me thinking of like, am I not focusing enough on trust building in the work that I'm doing? Or is it just something that just comes naturally in what I'm doing? So I haven't had to focus on it, or I'm just kind of, I've been doing a lot of thinking as far as which direction we can go today. But I'm curious for you guys, why do you think this one got picked?
Quick comment on current events. I mean, AI is obviously the talk of the town. And with AI, trust and ethics has never been a more important topic. So I think that could be another current event. Just with the growth of AI, people are wondering, and a election cycle, like for all we know, Trump or Biden or a politician says something, we get an emotional reaction. We learn that it was an AI-generated clip and it wasn't actually them, but we're still triggered. Trust is just like a circus show right now. So I don't think it's ever been more important to talk about ethics and trucks with AI and technology. And at the end of the day, people want to build connections, make money, grow their business, and you can't do any of that if people don't trust you.
What do you think, Christine?
I think trust it's a very hard thing to learn. So, because there's so many different pieces of it, right? Like you are trusting yourself, right? And that is that you can handle something, you can react a certain way, you're confident, right? You can take a risk. Like there's trust that's involved with that. And that's just with yourself, right? And then you have friends, you have like a spouse, which is a different level of trust. You could have a business partner, like that's a different level of trust, right? And then you have trusting in clients, trusting in like your community, and it's not all the same, right? Like how you would ask certain questions. I think you can keep things pretty simple, right? Like if people, like how do you find the red flags, I guess, is, in finding trust. And then what are the green flags? Like that would be something I think would be an easy discussion for us, because those things could apply to business partners. It could apply to yourself. It could apply to a spouse situation. So, people out there that have been divorced, like they may have a harder trust issue because, right, they're divorced, but that doesn't mean that they can't learn to trust again or feel better about that later down the road. Same thing in business. You can get a business divorce too. And that may deter you from ever opening another business with another person, but maybe you do things differently. You find an investor, right? Or you just have different questions that you ask the next time around. So I think it's like a loaded gun, right? We talk about trust because we've all had that situation where it's been smashed into pieces. And we've had people in our lives that we thought were one thing and weren't, but didn't find out right away, because I think we all give most people a great assault. Enough rope, right? And we're like, oh, it's great. It's fine. It's not that bad. We gaslight ourselves. And then we're like, oh, this isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. Even go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's hard. Like I've had those experiences, and it's hard to trust yourself that you're right sometimes, that something is not right. Like I'm feeling this in my gut, and it's not always like a black and white. And I think trust should be black and white, but it's not. Right? Something happens and it falls into the gray area, and it's not that it's bad or it's not that it's overly good. It's just like this neutral thing, but you're like, oh, well, I'm going to be flexible. Right. And then flexibility sometimes turns into a boundary movement, and it keeps happening, and it's like a frog in boiling water. And then now all of a sudden that trust somehow slipped away because that's what happened. And I think it's just a super hard thing to stay consistent with. I think also as you get older and you learn these lessons, you learn to recognize some of those things, but it doesn't always appear the same. Like I can say that from like divorce, right? It doesn't always appear the same in other relationships, because how you have a relationship with that person is different than how it was with a spouse. But it's still there, right? There still could be a red flag, but you're like, oh, I just didn't see it that way because, X, Y, and Z. And I think it's very challenging to trust someone to handle things, especially if it's a big thing, right? You're trusting someone to find that job for you or handle your money or like do an important document, right? Like we have our CPAs, our tax professionals. We're trusting that they're doing things right, that we don't have to double check it, right? And for a lot of people, that's blind. We do that a lot. We do a lot of blind trusting inadvertently, and until we get burned otherwise, right? And I think we do that in a lot of different areas that we shouldn't be blind on, but there's just so much going on that we don't have time to ask a further question get a second opinion, right? I think it happens in the medical field too, right? Like, sure, everyone has had an experience where they're like, that doesn't make sense. I'm confused. I need to go talk to somebody else about that, right? But if you're trusting that professional, like, well, they have 20 years of experience, they should know what they're talking about, right? Why am I second guessing that? And then you're like, but it doesn't feel right. Something's not right. So what do you trust? The person with 20 years of experience, or you trust that little voice in your head that's like, my spidey sense is tingling and this doesn't seem right.
Yeah. That's your instinct, right? And I think that thing that you mentioned, and by the way, you're bringing the heat today, Christine, on this topic. That was great, because that was a great jumping point for us. So what you said about we are innately trusting, I believe that's the case. I believe that we innately want to trust other people. And I think that's a very human thing, although we don't learn until we're burned, right? And maybe that can be a quote. That's kind of cool. You don't learn until you're burned, which is true. And then going forward from that point, hopefully you put processes in place, or you begin to listen to that more finely tuned instinct that you just mentioned with your spidey sense, to say to yourself, okay, I've been in this situation before. Should I listen to my instinct? And I think what you said applies to both personal relationships and business relationships, because if you're in a relationship, person cheats on you, you get in another relationship, person cheats on you, you get in another relationship, and it's like, okay, that person cheated on you. Whose fault is it? Right? Is it that person's fault for cheating on you, or was that going to happen anyway? Was it your fault for repeating the same pattern over again and then being surprised that this person cheated on you? From the outside in, Ben, Andrew, Christine, they're all saying, Brandon, you're stupid. Like, you made a stupid decision and you did it again. Right? And that can seem, coming from a place of hurt, that can seem like, it can seem like you're being slighted. But the reality is you made that mistake. So if you've been hurt in business or personally, it's time to assess our own protective defenses and start listening to our gut, listening to our instinct. But I like what you said, Christine, specifically about you can get burned in business or life, in the sense that in life, someone cheats on you, right? And that's a giant burn, like, whoa, complete betrayal. And in business, maybe someone steals $1 million from you. You're a partner for 3 years. Business is going great. Person steals $1 million and flees to Haiti or Costa Rica or whatever it might be, right? They disappear. And we hear about that happening, right? We hear about people that we follow talk about stories where that kind of thing has happened to them. So we know it's out there. But then there's the kind of trust. What's the word? There's a loss of trust that happens, like the frog in boiling water, where you're in a personal relationship and every year for the next 20 years, things just, the person continues to drop the ball. They stop taking the trash out. Maybe it starts there. And then they stop spending time with the kids. They get fired from their job and they get something that's not as ambitious to support the family. Now you're pulling all the weight. You're doing all the duties. You're doing all the things for the kids. And then you look 5 years later and you're like, whoa, like, what happened here? Like, why am I doing everything? I trusted this person to help support our family, and now they're not doing that. So I believe that is less on you, because it happens slowly over time. It's less of a pattern recognition thing and more of a, how do I create a boundary here now? How do I speak up when this has been going on for 5 years? Maybe you're in a business where someone just stops showing up to meetings, or they show up to the meeting and they're not prepared, or they aren't moving to the new initiative, or they won't let the person go anymore. They're not having these conversations like they used to. How do you have the conversation of, hey, things were here, now they're here. It seems that we have a breach of trust here. And it seems that we have a lack of boundary and understanding about the duties that each of us comes forth and does. So at that point, it comes down to a conversation. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, guys? Like, and specifically when trust is lost, do you believe that you can rebuild up that trust? And I'm going to say, you might be surprised to hear this, but I'm going to say no. I believe that it's, once you lose trust with a person, and even businesses with people, I do believe that it's It depends on the amount of trust that's lost. If you stole $1 million, you're probably not going to rebuild that trust. If you missed a few meetings, you'll probably rebuild it. I believe it's the scale of the problem. But do you believe it's possible to rebuild trust after a catastrophic event? And what are your thoughts on what Christine said?
I want to chime in on that. So Christine brought up a couple really good stuff, really good pieces. And some of it was like the green flag, red flag stuff. And I want to relate that to two things that Brandon was just talking about. And that's promises and expectations. And I feel like promises is kind of the building of trust, and expectations sometimes is where trust starts to get broke. Okay. Rose for a second.
You're back.
Am I back yet?
You're back.
I trusted you to carry out this
Sorry
segment.
I trusted you to be there. So promises and expectations, they're both related. And so, if I'm looking to build trust with someone, and if anyone's in sales, this, you can start making promises to somebody. Oh, I'll give you a call back, or I'll send you that thing right over to you, or I'll connect you with so-and-so. Okay. And when you keep a promise, you get to build trust. When you break a promise, you start to break trust. And then when you make promises, you start to create these expectations. Okay. We talked about marriage, right? There's some promises typically that you make to each other at the start of that. I promise this and I promise this. And sometimes you can go further. It's a vow, right? I'm promising with a third, higher entity here that we're going to be doing this together. And so it creates this expectation around what is going to happen here. How are things going to work with this? And in my household, we've been experiencing this with my now 3-year-old, just had a birthday, and she's delightful, so much fun, high energy, but she's extremely messy. And if we give her anything that has small pieces to it, whether it's food or water or, she gets access to a soap dispenser or the toilet paper, like everywhere, like it's going to become a mess. If she is unsupervised and with something that could become a mess, it will become a mess. And so I'm starting to try and instill in her a little bit, like, hey, like you're breaking my trust with you when you do that. Like I handed you, like yesterday, I handed her some Life cereal in a little plastic bag. I'm like, hey, this is your sister's. Don't eat all of it. When she gets back here, we need to give her the rest of it. And it's like, you understand? Yeah. Okay, great. And then she ends up eating a bunch of it, dumping the rest on the ground and in her little cup holder, and then taking some water and dumping that into her cup holder. And so like now all of it's totally ruined, and her sister gets back and she's freaking out because like all her food's gone. And so that's my poor choice as a dad. But but I had some trust broken there because I was assured that things were going to go okay. And so,
were you assured though?
Were you really assured? Like, really sure that was going to be okay? Yeah, my wife.
I kind of feel like that was a trust fail on you.
I put trust where I shouldn't have. Right? It's like she was maybe not worthy of that trust at that point.
She's not ready for it.
Based on what I know of her.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a big part of trust too, is like expectations, right? If I'm expecting that she's going to hold up her end of the bargain, then good, we're good to go. And I can lean into that trust. What I should have expected was that things were going to go poorly. And so, curious for you guys around, I guess, promises and expectations in particular, and kind of that green flag, red flag idea. How can we be building trust? How can we be, or if we're about to break trust, is there a way that we can reset expectations so that trust is still intact? Is there a way that if things are going towards catastrophe that we can kind of salvage it so it's just maybe a minor hit to our trust than a full emptying of that bank account? Kind of curious around those topics to hear from you guys, maybe particularly Ben.
I've got a very quick comment. So you mentioned, don't eat this, it's your sister's.
Don't eat all of it. Don't eat all
of it. What happens when you tell someone not to do something? They do it.
100%, right?
So this might be microanalyzing words, and I'm not in this situation, but possibly a way to say it would be, I know you love your sister, and I'm confident you're not going to eat this. Give her the trust. You don't do this. It's kind of like, I already know you're going to do it. It's kind of giving them the autonomy. For me, the dichotomy of trust is you want to give someone the responsibility and the confidence. Like, I know that you love to share, and you need to share half of this with your sister. So I just wanted to let you know in advance that what we want to do here. And I don't know if a kid would pick up on that or not. When you tell them not to do something, they absolutely will do it. But if you tell someone, don't cheat on me, that's not how you're supposed to say it. You're supposed to say, I know you would never cheat on me. It's flipping it and giving them the autonomy. The dichotomy here, though, is what happens when you give someone responsibility and they don't do the trustworthy decision. That's where it gets difficult, because in my experience, the best way to receive trust is to give trust. Here's a task. I'm totally trusting you're going to do this. Like, here's some responsibility. Here's something new. When there's team members, the last thing you want to do is bully someone into doing something. You want to give them the responsibility and the autonomy to take this thing and try something new. Like, feel free to fail. Like, this is new. Go ahead and try it. The difficult thing that I don't have an answer for is what do you do when the trust is broken? The short version for me, and this isn't the most empathetic thing, is I get the hell out of those situations as quick as possible. But I just want to, I went deeper than I thought. The one thing I noticed is you told her not to do something and then she did it. I'm curious if you like framed it differently, if it would make any difference, but it's possible it wouldn't make any difference at all. But I know as an adult in sales conversations and in team conversations, I never tell people like not to do things or what to do or what not to do. I'm like, I'm really confident you can handle this. What do you think? And they're like, yeah, I can do this. And then they go and do it.
I mean,
Hey,
I was just going to say that I just feel like that's so interesting, right? Because you're speaking to a different audience in that. Because if you told me what not to do, I am a people pleaser. So I follow all of those things to a T. I would never go against what someone asked me to do. And that's also how I give trust to other people, right? If you say, don't tell anyone about this, I will never tell anyone about this. If you say, hey, can you do this for me? And I say, yes, I'm going to do it. If I say I'm going to show up, if I make that promise, right, I'm never going to break it unless something really bad happened, and I'm going to communicate that, right? But I think some people just don't have the same mindset about that, right?
You're super high character. Not every people are quite as high character.
But maybe that's also the different type of trust, right? Like, and I think trust is also not just, it's not black and white. It's on this like scale. And like when you're talking to a 3-year-old, like if this is how she is, I would have brought another bag and been like, well, she's probably going to make a mess. And like, I'm just going to assume it's going to be a disaster. So how do I make it a disaster so it doesn't bother me, right? Like it's just not gonna be an issue anymore, and then it's just not an issue and she might grow out of it, right? Like that's just the mom side of me, right? Like trying to figure that stuff out, because that's just like there's predictability with behavior a lot of the times, right? So, you know, when you give someone confidence that they can do something and you're giving them responsibility and you're like, you know, I'm so happy that you're going to help me do this, right? Like that's a different frame of mind and saying like, don't go do this. But I think everyone responds very differently. But for specific things, like somebody went out of their way to hurt you, or somebody did something like, I think Brandon was saying like, oh, or maybe Ben, like, well, what happens when someone does this? And that's like, you know, you crossed the line. Like, you know, you should never have done something like that. Like you stole from a partner, you stopped putting effort in, like you just went out of your way, even if it was a long-term thing. Like, you know, you shouldn't have been doing this. And yet you did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it could be salvageable, but like, is it though? Because that just to me shows the type of person that you are. You took advantage of the fact that I gave you rope. You took advantage of the fact that I picked up the slack. You took advantage of the fact that I was willing to offset the percentage of that relationship because maybe you needed it, but then it didn't come back. Like, that to me is the complete fail.
For those who are watching the video and not just listening, you'll notice that, and I'm going to steal your joke, Christine. You'll notice that Andrew has trust fell. He trusted us to carry it forward with the utmost quality to answer the questions that you were asking about. trust. And I love that, Christine. And I think we should talk about that character idea, because like what you said, Ben, well, Christine, you're high character. Well, was Christine born like that? Was it because of her parents and the way that they parented her? Was it because she trusted someone and they broke the trust and she's like, whoa, I know how that feels and I'm never going to do that to anybody else? Like, where does that innate character of trustworthiness come from? I want to ask you guys that. But I believe that trust is synonymous with leadership. I believe they're one and the same. They're one and the same. We could retitle this episode Leadership and we'd have the same exact conversation, because the first person that you have to trust in order for others to trust you, the first person that you have to lead is yourself. If you aren't a trustworthy person, then other people are not going to want to follow you. Other people are not going to trust you. And can you meet somebody and know practically immediately whether they are a trustworthy person? Yes or no? Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah. And sometimes no, you learn through their actions, but very quickly you can feel the energy of whether this person is going to be trustworthy or not. So we have to become that trustworthy individual. So maybe this conversation can go in the direction of, are we innately trustworthy or not trustworthy? Is it a character trait? Like, what are your thoughts there? Where does it come from?
The psychology end of things is what trips me up, because that's such a big question. That's a nature versus nurture question. As to, are we innately trustworthy? I don't think so. I think that it's, how did our parents raise us? Once we grew up to be our own selves, our own adults, how do we treat ourselves? What do our habits look like? What do our results look like? What do our relationships look like? How do we appear? How do we show up? What is our character? How accountable are we? It's a day-to-day action. They talk about it all the time, that it could take 10 years to build a personal brand and 10 minutes to burn it to the ground. It's how we show up every single moment. And we don't always have perfect moments. I've done things that haven't been good, but I don't think we're born a certain way. I think through time we develop good or bad habits. We develop leadership habits, or we develop poor habits, and we grow in different directions. But and part of that, though, is the beauty that if you have been living in one way, let's say you've went to prison because you did something terrible, even possibly deplorable, and you've gotten a second chance, you have a new opportunity to build trust that wasn't there before. So I do think it's very much how you show up, but it has to be a long enough time horizon. The most trustworthy leaders, the most effective people don't just say, trust me. They actually show people that they should be trusted on a day-to-day, over a long time horizon, that it's obvious that there's someone who can be trusted. Hope
And
that
I
makes
think
sense.
it's over time too,
Yeah.
because there have been very well-known individuals that can exhibit traits that they are trustworthy, but they aren't. And the reason why they do that is it's for predatory reasons, right? Like major corporations have done that, right? We're like, hey, we're gonna like Bernie Madoff is a real good example, right? Like that's a very big one. Hey, trust me to take care of your money and it's going to be fine. And we're going to help get you to that next level, right? Well, that's not what happened, right? And there's famous serial killers, like Ted Bundy's another good example, right? Very charismatic. No one would believe that that person was not a trustworthy individual, but he's attractive. He's so nice. Oh, he's so kind. He's so generous. He's a serial killer. and it's interesting, right? If learned over time, a lot of times we don't learn from our mistakes because the mistakes weren't big enough. Or they weren't catastrophic to the way we live our lives, right? So it didn't change much. Divorce is a big one, right? But that doesn't always mean people learn from it, because they could just say, well, it was them. They did this, right? Doesn't mean that they weren't at fault, could be true, right? But then you go into the next relationship and you have to go with like, okay, I'm not going to be with somebody who's similar, who does those things because it didn't work, right? But not everybody does that inner inflection to see, okay, what wasn't working in that situation. Same thing with these people that, were with Bernie Madoff, right? Okay, well, what am I going to look for? Because they may not be trusting of another financial person ever in their life. Is that the best outcome? No, there's other people, but now they need to ask different questions. Okay, FINRA exists for a reason, to protect people and their money. Okay, are you FINRA regulated? You're not? Okay, well, then I'm not going to work with you, right? So, being able to ask those different questions. And I think we also hear it from each other about a situation that you may never experience, but your friend did. Take everything with a grain of salt and say, I'm just going to consume all this information and I'm going to put it in my tool belt. And I'm going to refer to it if I come across a situation that kind of sounds a little hairy and I'm like, this doesn't sound right. So I'm going to call somebody who I do trust, who's going to give me an honest opinion and going to give me the feedback, not because I need to hear it, but they're like, hey, listen, that doesn't sound right. Then you're like, okay, I can trust myself because what I heard, what I felt was accurate. And I think, we've had discussions about like building community and, having a tribe and like those types of things. And I think trust is even more valuable when you have other people who are always there to help you figure out if the trust you're feeling or it's dwindling or it's breaking apart is actually happening in that way.
Yeah. And, maybe even me asking, is trust an innate thing? Is it something you're born with? Is it something you learn? Maybe that wasn't even the best question, because does it really matter where it comes from? Like some people don't even need to work hard at all to stay in shape. It just innately comes to them. But most people do, right? Some people are just innately a trustworthy person. It doesn't matter how that came to be. No, but the reality is, for the vast majority of us that are innately, weird to say it this way, but innately not born as the most trustworthy Jesus-like individual, we still need to know how to do it, right? And chances are, if you're listening, you need to know how to do it. When I say do it, I mean you need to know how to create a culture and foster an environment of trust in your family, in your workplace, wherever it may be. And believe me, I've been in many situations in my professional career, mostly my professional career, where I have broken trust to the point where it was not possible to get it back. And specifically, when I started to build my career in sales, when I started to move into leadership, I was surrounded by a team of about 10 to 12 people at the time who I had burned at one time or another. I would make a sale, not share them in on the sale. They would talk to somebody, the customer would come back the next day, I'd ring them out, right? And that's just the name of the game, but there's a way to go about it. There's a way to discuss it and have conversations about it. Not just Christine walks in and says, wait, you just helped Betsy, who I talked to yesterday? Like, yes, Christine should have closed that sale yesterday. But the point is, I could have called her and said, hey, I just want to let you know about something that happened. But Christine had to find out on her own. That's just one example. But when I wanted to build my career, I realized through the help of other people, it didn't just come to me. This is why we need people in our life to help us, that I was going to have to build up that trust with these individuals. And the first step of that, of building trust in a team environment, was confessing and fessing up. Hey, listen, Ben, what I did was wrong. I see that what I did was wrong. And I know that these words might not mean much right now, but I want to show you that I know that what I did was wrong. And through my actions, I want to build a relationship with you to show you that I do want to help you. Right. And then I asked Ben what it is he wants, what his goals are, how I can help him get there. And the most important thing of all to building this reputation of trust is following through on what you said that you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I did. And I did with the help of other people, many mentors in my life, right, who helped me through this. And I was able to do it. And over the course of the next 6 months, we built one of the best teams in upstate New York for this sales company. But then it got to the point where I lost that trust again. And now I'm in a leadership position, one of the highest ones inside of this company, training director, leadership director, and I decide I want to start my own business. Some people thought that was a cool idea. A lot of other people did not think it was a cool idea. Because what does that mean? Well, I'm starting my own business, but I'm in a very high up position inside of this other company that they're trusting me to devote my time to still. How much time do we really have as a single individual? Not the most time, at least perceived by other people outside the business world, not the most time. So while I'm building my business, writing my book, now there's a lack of trust because it's like, Brandon, you're working on all these projects for us, but how are you writing your book? How are you doing these podcast episodes? How are you building this YouTube channel? And it comes down to, you can only do so many things at once, right? So now that trust there is lost. And is it repairable? Well, over the next 3 years, I did my best. Like I changed everything that I did. I even stepped down from several positions so I could focus on my business without there being weirdness inside the corporate environment. But after 3 years of doing that, up until literally a few months ago, it wasn't possible to rebuild that trust that was lost. And by the way, no fault but my own. I'm the only person at fault in that situation. To the point where recently, and neither of you know this actually, this is the first time I'm telling you, recently I switched industries entirely. I went from telecommunications, selling phones, to life insurance. And now it's a whole new arena. Where I have to rebuild. I get to rebuild trust again with a new group of people as a new person. And how do they know they can trust me, right? All they're operating from is a resume, which is also a reputation. Mm-hmm. But your resume may say one thing, but above all, it's your actions that speak volumes. So the only way to build trust in a team environment is through your actions and through being a trustworthy person yourself.
I mean, I would say that, like, if that happened to me, which it has happened to me, things like that, I would say, like, why did the other company stop trusting you? Like, you've been there for so long, and now suddenly you're questioning things because I have different interests now. Like, why are you questioning these things?
So many reasons, though. There's so many different reasons. Jealousy. It could be a lot of things.
To me, that would be that would be red flags. I'd be like, why are you all of a sudden having an issue with these things? And if you don't like it, right? Like, and obviously, like you thought it was better to leave, but definitely actions speak louder than words in regards to trust. And I think how we trust people is also not the same, right? Like my level of trust with somebody is like in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's always that chance that someone could do something, right? But I'm like, well, if they know anything about me, they know that like if somebody asks me for something, like I have their back. Like that's just the type of person that I am. So I try and surround myself with people who are the same. So if I actually need something, I have a number of people that I can be like, hey, here's the situation, here's what I need help with. And they're actually going to follow through with that. But unfortunately, like that's just not the case. There's not a lot of people who are willing to put the time and effort in because they don't see it as an advantage, I guess, for them. And then you really question like, well, the level of trust I have for them is only to a certain point, right? Like going back to like a pyramid situation, like the most trust that you put in somebody is very few people. Like they would die for you. Like that's the type of person. At the bottom, it's okay, I can trust you to do a very simple task, right? Like, working for this new company, Brandon, I can tell you why they trust you, because if you don't do your job, they can be like, bye. Like, that's exactly it. Like, it's that simple. Like, they don't need to put a lot of trust in you. And because you're probably like working your own hours, like they don't really care as long as you produce, right? Mm-hmm. So that's also the difference, but the expectation is different. So I think, there's a lot of things that are intertwined, and it's not a very straightforward piece, but you would think over time trust gets easier, but it doesn't.
It's true. It doesn't get easier. It changes, because even inside of a business, trust comes down to not the business, but the people that comprise the business.
Yeah.
And people are constantly changing, like themselves, people are changing, but also the people are constantly changing. So trust is a continuous cycle. And even if you're highly trusted amongst one group of people, if you're in a high turnover industry, boom, you got to rebuild that. Like it's not just inherited from person to person to person. So you brought up something really good earlier, Ben. You talked about specifically trust among brands, especially with things like AI and how you can manipulate pictures, manipulate audio. Like I saw a video on Instagram the other day of someone who did an AI voiceover for Trump and Biden. And dude, I thought it was real. And I was like, what is this atrocity? And then I look and everyone in the comments is like, this is a great voiceover. And then I read the caption and it is. It's like, this is a voiceover. So everyone knows. But the point of it was to show how easily we can be manipulated using AI. And where I'm going with this is when I look at people like you specifically, Ben, like Christine, I think you were the one who introduced me to Ben. Is that right? I think so. Yes.
Yeah, it was one of those, I forget what you call him, Christine, but you introduced me to networking bomb.
Yep. So I looked at Ben's profile when you first introduced me to him, and I'm going through and Ben's got a picture of him. He's smiling. He's looking sharp. It was actually the picture right behind you, Ben, on your poster. That was your profile picture. I don't think it is anymore. But I was like, all right, he's a good looking guy. He's got a lot of stuff going on here. I go down and I'm seeing videos of him, right? So now I get to see him in action. I get to see him talking. I see his recommendations. I see people commenting on his stuff. I see people following him. I'm like, okay, he's got it going on, right? But there's two things specifically about Ben that caused me to trust him, even without really having a basis to trust him. It was just like the animal instinct part of me, which is one, you're constantly showing up. I'm getting emails from you. I'm seeing you on my feed. I'm seeing you on cross platforms, not just one place, mostly LinkedIn, but also other places. So you're always top of mind for me. Two, I said two things, but three things. Two, you've never done me wrong. I have no reason not to trust you. And three, video content. I'm constantly seeing you, your face, your voice. I'm constantly seeing you interact with people on your podcast and your show. And to all coaches, consultants, authors, anything out there, if you want to build trust, one, be consistent with what you're doing. Don't show up for a month and then take a month off. Be consistent. And two, get yourself out there. Put your face out there, your voice out there. Make it as close to me sitting in that room with you as possible, because the more I see you and the more consistently I see you, the more I will trust you. It's just, I think it goes back to the tribes, right? You were around people every single day. You had a small group of people you were constantly with. You saw them every single day. It's the same thing across social platforms too. You've got to not reenact, but you've got to simulate the idea that you're with that person all the time. It really comes down to how much that person can be around you. And as a brand, consistency and humanity, just putting yourself out there, I believe is most important. So that's a shout out to you, Ben. You're doing a great job. I trust you.
Let's just talk about me the rest of the time. No, I actually have a framework for certainty. And I think this is a good time to mention it because it very much is business and it's for rapid trust. But let's go back a little bit. So when you look at sales, you'll probably love this framework. I almost want to draw it for you, Brandon. But like the two most important things are trust and value. Is that pretty much fair to say? Great tips on building trust. Thanks for the love, Rena. Trust and value. And to me, value is generally the product or service itself. And then trust is a little bit more hard to define. It's their trust in the salesperson, in the business, in the team. It's separate from product. So let's not talk about value. That's product and service. But when you look at trust, to me, the best way to build trust is to create certainty. This is going to be a lot of C's, so I feel like we could have done this for the letter C. But to create certainty, you need, let me write this down. You need character, competence, connections, and commitment. So I'll break this down really simply. To create certainty, character. Who are you? What's your fingerprint? What do you like? What is your character like? What do you like as a person? And you mentioned video. A great way to show people your character is to get on video or to get on a one-to-one and just be yourself. Is classic advice. Like Christine's got purple hair. That's part of her character. That's part of what makes her unique. That's part of what makes her fun and different and interesting. Competence. Competence is, how competent are you? Are you good at your job? Do you know what you're talking about? If you want to build a ton of trust, know what you're talking about. How do you learn to know what you're talking about? That takes time, or just having the humility to learn from someone who knows more than you. It's showing your competence or a perceived competence for the ability to get better. So we've got character, competence, connections. You mentioned like the endorsements or the stuff on my profile. A connection is like, are people endorsing you? Is your network large? Is a lot of people following you? When you're in, let's say, a sales presentation, do you have a lot of case story examples of people just like them being successful? Are you well connected? Are you connecting people to results? So character, competence in what you do, connections, and the ability to show that other people, social proof that other people think you're all right. And then commitment is, we talked about commitment a lot without talking about commitment, but really commitment is, will you do what you say you're going to do? I'll be there at 9, Brandon. I show up at 8:59.
Yep.
I won't eat this. I don't eat it. I'm not going to cheat on you. I don't cheat on you.
Thank God.
Commitment is so darn important. It's you can hack connections with testimonials. You can hack character by just taking some charisma persuasion tips. You can hack competence by just being really good at explaining one simple concept. But if you don't show up day in, day, and you're not committed to the craft, I don't think you can hack that.
Yeah.
So that would be my big 4: character, competence, connections, and commitment. And those are all green lights. But if you're looking for red flags, it's the same categories. Are they just the biggest thing when I'm looking for a friend? And it's a weird statement to make, but do they have friends? Because if they don't have any other friends, that is a red flag.
Wow.
If they act like they know what they're talking about, but they have no clue what they're talking about, red flag. If they don't show up when they say they're going to show up, red flag. If they have a bad character, if they're rude to people, red flag. It's the same exact categories, but you can look for the green lights or the red flags. So in a business context, hack for the green lights, but in a life context, it's not really a hack. These are things you want to live every single day.
Yeah.
Wow. Damn.
The reason I brought that up is you were
trust.
talking about all those things in my profile. It's mindful. There's endorsements on purpose.
Yes.
I'm smiling on purpose. I look professional on purpose because I want people to trust me and have certainty. And then the key is showing up and actually proving them right.
Yes. That, I think what you just said is so important, because a lot of people, they'll play the humility card. And when I say that, this is what I mean. They'll say things like, I'm building a business, but I don't have to put those things on my profile because people will know that they can trust me once they actually buy my service, or once they actually have a conversation with me, once they come to my event, once they do this. Well, you're never going to get there if you don't intentionally craft your image around those 4 C's: character, competence, connection, commitment. Craft your image around them, and then show up and prove through your actions that is you. But if you craft your image around those things and it's not you, people are going to find that out real quickly also. So, dude, that's a book right there, by the way, Ben. Rapid Trust, How to Build Trust in Business and Life, the 4 C's: red flags, green lights. Like, dude, like, I see you right, and you're like, we'll have AI write this book on trust.
The only C I missed was credibility, but I feel like credibility is just guaranteed when you hit those.
Yeah, I think credibility is commitment. I think credibility is a mix between commitment and character. If I had to,
well, it's other people too, right? Like, it's a testimonial from people, or well, I actually think it's people talking about you when you're not in the room. That's where the credibility comes in. And because you've proved your commitment, right, to other people, and other people can vouch for that. And I think it helps with trust very easily when somebody's like, oh yeah, I already work with them and they're amazing and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, okay, right? Like the decision has usually been made at that point. If you're deciding between one of two people and you just talk to someone about this one person you were deciding on, you're probably going to go with that person now, right? It just makes it a lot easier. And I think we all do that because we're like, hey, I don't know which hairdresser I should go to. Who do you guys use? I need to get this type of service done. And you're going to get a list of 5 different people. And then you're going to go and search their website, their social media. You're going to check out their prices. You might message those people and say, okay, what was your actual experience? What did you actually have done? Oh, this is what I charged, or this is what I paid. This is the experience. Here's how long it took. And you're going to narrow it down from there, right? Because other people are already vouching for this person that they had the service with, right? That's a very quick example. But I think that's why I think trust is such a massive thing, right? It's not just a black and white, and there's so many things that affect it. Your own opinions, other people's opinions, and then the experience. And I think trust can be broken so easily too. And I think humans are pretty forgiving, depending on what level of trust, like what level was broken, right? If it's a top level, like it definitely can't be rebuilt. But then you also question, I myself have questioned when something is broken. I'm like, was it never really full to start with?
True.
Because it seemed to have broken so easily. I don't think it was fully stable. That trust was never fully stable because you're getting, if we're using Ben's checklist to see those green flags. And if somebody's really good at faking it, which I've been unfortunate to experience that, you kind of hobble along long enough because they haven't really had to do much, right? And then when something big happens, that's why and Brandon, I don't know if you ever experienced this when you guys got married, but when big events happen, you find people's true colors at that time. Somebody dies, somebody gets married, somebody has a baby, somebody opens up a business. Those are times you figure out who people really are because those are big things, right? Like whether they're coming, they're supporting you, they're calling you, they're checking in on you, they're showing up to your business ribbon cutting, right? Like it's really easy to figure out who's really putting the effort in. And there's nothing worse than when somebody's like, oh, I'll be there, and they don't show up.
Exactly. And that's the big thing. If they say they're going to be there and they don't show up, that's the thing. If they don't say anything, then like what you said, was the trust ever there in the first place? Because I know so many people, and me included, at points where what was it as an example? What's a good thing? I can't think of one, but let's say you host a party, someone doesn't show up, and then we say to ourselves or outwardly to my wife or whoever, I can't believe this person didn't show up. That they were the one person I thought would be here. Whose fault is that? My fault, because I had a false expectation of where me and this other person was. I had a false expectation of trust. The trust wasn't there in the first place. It was perceived on my part, but the other person probably wasn't even thinking about me in the first place. So if we had to go through a rapid fire real quick on one last thing to get people about trust, the one thing I'd leave them with is a combination of what we've all said. Trust is leadership. It's the same exact thing. Where does leadership start? With yourself. If you can't trust yourself, other people aren't going to trust you. Do you do the things that you say you're going to do? If you say, I'm not going to eat bread this whole week because I want to lose weight, and then the next day you eat bread, you broke trust with the most important person, yourself. If you say, I'm going to go to the gym for the next month, and then you don't go day 4, you lost trust with yourself. That's the most important trust that you can't lose. So don't make a promise to yourself unless you fully intend to keep that promise, and start with small promises. And the more you fulfill them, the more that you'll build trust in yourself. And then as a result, the more other people will be able to trust you as well.
The one thing I'd say is looking at character, competence, connections, and commitment. Circle one of them. If they stand out as something, a muscle you need to build, work on that. And if you're thinking character, competence, connections, commitment, you're not sure where to start, I think the best way for most people, the best place to start would be the commitment section. I have a great friend. She's a perfect example. She is the nicest, most genuine, kick-ass person on earth. She will not show up to things on time. And I just came to trust the fact I know she's going to be late, and actually don't think less of her. It's just it's been a 15-year time frame that she's always been late for everything. She's just late for everything. And I'm not here to like put her on the spot. Most of us have issues. Maybe it's agreeableness. We say yes to something even though we should have said no to it. We really can't do it. We want to be there, but we can't. Like we double book. Most people struggle with keeping commitments to themselves and others. So if you're already kicking butt there, look at the other three. But if you don't know where to start, it's just keeping, you just said it, Brandon, it's keeping your commitment to yourself and others. And then all the other stuff will build organically on its own.
Yeah. What do you think, Christine? What's your last tidbit? We're not leaving until you tell us.
I feel like this is like Ben's perfect mic drop. So I think just be aware, right? Be able to have time to self-reflect on, the golden rule, right? Treat people as you would want to be treated, but also be true to that. Because if they're not, don't let it go too long, because it's more devastating over time when the trust doesn't happen. And I think it's okay to be like, okay, this isn't working. Let's have a conversation about it, because people are just not aware.
Yeah.
Right? Like people are just not aware of things. They might be doing untrustworthy things, but they think they don't think anything of it, right? But if that's your line, okay, fine, that's your line. Like you should make that known and part ways accordingly. So just being aware. Like
it's a great point.
Keeping your spidey senses front of mind. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not.
Yeah, communicating those boundaries of you might think this is right, but I don't think it's right. So where's the line there? Like that communication is important everywhere. Yep. That's especially a really important personal relationship line for sure. I love it. Great stuff today, guys. And I'm sure Andrew would have had great last tips too, but he shared his value while he was here. And I hope that you guys took a lot out of this conversation. If you did, share it with someone. Share it on LinkedIn here if you're watching it live right now. Rena Cicerone, thank you so much for joining us.
And to Rena and everyone listening, thanks for trusting your time with us.
Yes, thank you. We are grateful for you, because without you, these episodes wouldn't be happening. So what's the next letter? A, B, C, D, F, G. U. Okay, great.
That was it's about to get difficult as we get to the end of the alphabet.
I'm excited for difficult though. Like I'm excited for what
zebra
that might look like.
Xylophone.
I just want to be like, let's talk about umbrellas the whole time.
Let's do it.
There were like, or like the metaphor of an umbrella, right? Like, I don't know. It could be interesting.
We'll let the people choose. We'll let the people pick. So keep an eye out for the next vote. Ben will likely be the one posting the poll. Be sure to check it out. We'll all share it. And based on your input, we'll have our next conversation. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.
Peace.
Okay, bye.